A fingerprint on a pink telephone, left there in 1988. Waiting 35 years for a match. A strand of hair from a stolen van. Sitting in an evidence locker for 3 decades. Speaking a name in 2026. A piece of chewing gum spit out on a bike path. The moment a 44-year search ended. 9 cold cases. 9 families who waited. Some of them decades. Some of them a lifetime. A woman strangled in a Wisconsin front yard. Her killer's DNA in every database law enforcement had. No match. For 23 years. A young woman stabbed in a New Mexico living room. The man responsible dead for 34 years before science finally put his name to what he did. A 19-year-old mother beaten and strangled in her own apartment. 3 innocent men went to prison for it. 18 years of wrongful imprisonment. The real man responsible worked the overnight shift at Walmart, a few towns over. A teenager found face down in a Montana marsh. The man who held her there had been a government biologist for 22 years. A 100% DNA match confirmed from a body on a table. He never made it to a courtroom. A young woman hitchhiking to an art show in Chicago. Her killer was 84 years old, living in an assisted living facility, and thought the color of his car had saved him. It almost did. 50 years almost did. A 19-year-old girl heading to community college. Witnesses watched her running out of the woods, bloody and waving for help. Nobody stopped. A piece of chewing gum on a bike path ended it 44 years later. A 15-year-old found in a shallow marsh. 4 rootless arm hairs. 28 years. A biologist who could not hold his composure for 2 hours. A man murdered in his Tampa condominium. His DNA linked through an FBI database to an unsolved case in a completely different state. Solved on the exact 28th anniversary of the night it happened. And a 6-year-old girl in a Bowling Green parking lot, grabbed in broad daylight while her sister watched. A single strand of hair in an evidence locker. 30 years. A confession in full. 9 cases. 9 families who kept the faith when the system ran out of answers. Stay with me to the end. Because what you are about to hear is not just about crime. It is about what happens when science finally catches up to the truth, and what it costs a family to carry unanswered questions for the rest of their lives. Family. Before I walk you through all 9 of these cases, the fingerprints, the DNA, the chewing gum, the arm hairs, the hair strand, the stocking cap, the tank top, the pink telephone, the van. Before I take you through every detail and every question that science finally answered, we stop, because every case in this video is a real person, a real family, a real wound that for some of them took 50 years to close. And for some, it still has not fully closed, because the person responsible is gone, and a courtroom will never give them what they deserve. This video is presented for informational and public awareness purposes. All information is drawn from confirmed public records, court documents, law enforcement press releases, and verified reporting, where a case remains pending trial. That is clearly stated. Let's pray. Lord, for Linda, for Donna Sue, for Kathy, for Barbara, for Danielle, for Mary, for Stephen, for Teresa, for Ricky, for Morgan, for the families who sat with these questions for years, for the investigators who never put the files away, for the scientists and genealogists who followed a strand of DNA through family trees, through databases, through decades, to find a name, for the families who got a name but not a verdict, for the families who got a verdict but never got to see it, for the families who are still waiting for a courtroom, for justice that arrived late, and for the truth, which it turns out was always there, waiting for the right technology to read it. Amen. Type Amen. Where you watching from? Country and city? Drop it below. Subscribe. Because when one of these cases has a new development, you want to be in this room when it happens. 9 cases. 9 families. Let's begin. Linda Fields, Racine, Wisconsin, February 2000. A front yard. A pine tree. A February afternoon in Wisconsin. On February 24, 2000, at approximately 1:38 in the afternoon, the body of 37-year-old Linda Fields was discovered in the front yard of 1132 Lake Avenue in Racine, Wisconsin, lying beneath a low-hanging pine tree near the lakefront. The Milwaukee Medical Examiner's Office determined she had been strangled by hand. She had last been seen alive 2 days earlier, on February 22nd. Oh, 2 days. And in those 2 days no one knew. No one came. No one found her. Linda Fields was a mother and a sister. Her son Carl later told reporters that her spirit and her influence remained very much a part of their lives. Her younger sister Kathy called Linda her role model, the kind of woman who shapes everyone around her. And then one February afternoon, she was gone. What investigators had. From the very beginning, law enforcement had DNA. The killer had left biological evidence on Linda's body, and investigators did everything right. They entered that profile into the Wisconsin DNA databank, into the convicted felons database, into the National CODIS system, the 3 primary tools available at the time. Nothing came back from any of them. Investigator Steve Mike led the original probe, interviewing witnesses over weeks and months. 5 suspects were tested over the following years. Each one was eliminated. A May 2001 lab report confirmed all DNA samples came from a single unknown male contributor. Additional testing in 2005 on previously unsubmitted evidence matched the same profile. 1 person, 1 crime, no match. The case was reassigned in 2005. Reassigned again in 2012. Fresh eyes, new leads, new interviews. The same wall. The person responsible simply was not in the system. How does someone leave their DNA at a scene, have it entered into every available database, and remain invisible for over 2 decades? The breakthrough. In August 2020, Racine Police Chief Art Howell ordered the case re-examined. Investigator Chris Blackmore took over, working alongside DCI Special Agent Neil McGrath and FBI Agent Sarah Duron. In April 2021, Wisconsin State Crime Lab analyst Natalie Fisher confirmed enough DNA remained for investigative genetic genealogy analysis. The sample was sent to Aram Incorporated in the Woodlands, Texas for forensic-grade genome sequencing. January 2022, a familial DNA search identified an individual who was the parent, brother, or son of the contributor. That person's son was eliminated. His brother was eliminated. The father remained. His name was Lucas Asensio Alonso. FBI agents located him in Birmingham, Alabama. They later learned he had traveled to Zion, Illinois. On February 21, 2023, the day before the 23rd anniversary of Linda's death, investigators collected a DNA swab from Alonso during a traffic stop via search warrant. Analyst Pekowski confirmed the match. 1 in 1 quadrillion. That is not a probability. That is a certainty wearing the clothes of a statistic. What Alonso said. Alonso was 66 at the time of his arrest. No prior criminal record of any kind. He had never been fingerprinted. Never had his DNA collected. He had met Linda Fields at a local bar on the night she died. According to his statement, they left the bar together with 2 other people and were dropped off near Lake Avenue. He admitted to becoming angry during an encounter and choking her, acknowledging he did so multiple times. He claimed he thought she was still alive when he walked away. Whether that was true or not, Linda Fields was found beneath that pine tree 2 days later, and Lucas Alonso went on living his life for another 23 years. He was detained at his workplace on March 6, 2023, and charged with 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide. Bail was set at $1 million cash. He pleaded not guilty on July 26, 2023. As of the most recent available reporting, no public verdict has been announced. If convicted, Alonso faces life in prison, 23 years, a familial DNA search, and a traffic stop that ended 2 decades of invisibility. Type Linda to keep her name in this room. Donna Sue, Carlsbad, New Mexico, July 1987. 36 years. That is how long this case sat cold. 36 years from the night it happened to the afternoon, a name was finally attached to it. And the only way to get that name was to dig up the man it belonged to. On July 8, 1987, 38-year-old Donna Sue Hyatt was found on her living room floor at 708 North Elm Street in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Her daughter discovered the body at approximately 11:40 in the evening. Donna Sue had been beaten, stabbed, and strangled. Earlier that evening, witnesses had seen her with a tall man, leaving a nearby store on foot at approximately 9:15. Donna Sue was a member of the First Baptist Church and the Christian Women's Club. Her family described her as a loving daughter, sister, mother, and grandmother, always friendly, chatty, and sunny. She had 2 daughters, Angela and Michelle, a mother, a father, and 2 sisters. A world of people who needed to know what happened on North Elm Street. And for 36 years, they could not get an answer. The investigation. The Carlsbad Police Department conducted a thorough investigation, following up on numerous leads, interviewing members of the community, reviewing individuals in Donna Sue's personal life and the broader Carlsbad area. The case was named Carlsbad's Crime of the Week. A $500 reward was posted. It led nowhere. The original officers preserved the crime scene materials carefully, a decision that would prove critical decades later. But in 1987, no technology existed to extract what those materials held. DNA testing in 2010 temporarily revived the case. No match in any available database. The trail went cold once more. 36 years would pass before anyone had a name. How do you solve it when the suspect is dead? In this case, you dig them up. Carlsbad detectives Joey Landgraf and Tim Nice sent preserved crime scene evidence to Aram Incorporated for forensic-grade genome sequencing. Aram built a comprehensive DNA profile, which was then used by the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team to develop investigative leads. Those leads pointed to a man named Michael Ruff Wigley, a man who had been investigated in the early 1980s for 2 separate incidents of violence against women in Central Texas, was convicted in one of them and served prison time. But there was a problem. Michael Ruff Wigley had passed away in a traffic accident in 1989, 2 years after taking Donna Sue's life. He could never be questioned. He could never sit in a courtroom. He could never look Angela and Michelle in the eye. But he could still be identified. The exhumation. Investigators obtained a search warrant to exhume Wigley's body from a cemetery in Amarillo, Texas, a process that required legal coordination across 2 states. DNA extracted from the remains was tested using Aram's specialized Kin-SNP testing protocol, which positively and definitively confirmed Michael Ruff Wigley as the person responsible for what happened at 708 North Elm Street. Witnesses also confirmed that Wigley had been present in Carlsbad during the time of the crime. Right city, right night. The case was officially closed and solved on April 11, 2023. No prosecution was possible. The person responsible had been gone for 34 years by the time his name was confirmed. Carlsbad Mayor Dale Janway stated that the case was a true testimony to the fact that justice can prevail through the hard work and dedication of officers and the community. Oh, Donna Sue's daughters Angela and Michelle waited 36 years to hear a name. They got one. They got confirmation. They got the truth. They just could not get a courtroom, or a verdict, or a sentence. The case was featured on Investigation Discovery's Bloodline Detectives and the DNA ID podcast. Type Donna Sue to keep her name in this room. Kathy Schwarz, 3 Rivers, Michigan, December 1988. When investigators finally identified the person responsible after 35 years, he was very much alive. And what he did when they came for him told its own story. On December 2, 1988, in 3 Rivers, Michigan, 18-year-old Mike Warner came home from work around 3:30 in the afternoon to the apartment he shared with his fiancée, 19-year-old Kathy Sue Schwarz, and their infant daughter, Courtney. He noticed traces on the stair railing. The baby was crying in her crib, unharmed. Kathy's body was found in another bedroom. She had been beaten, stabbed multiple times, strangled, and had her throat cut. The scene was extraordinarily violent. Evidence was smeared up the railing, against the walls, and the person responsible had written at the scene, "I was here." A fingerprint was found on Kathy's pink GTE telephone. There was no forced entry. Kathy Schwarz was 19 years old. She was a single mother, engaged to be married the following June. She bowled in a league with her mother every week. Her father ran the pro shop at the local bowling alley. She loved hunting with her dad. She was an exceptional artist. Friends described her as sweet, caring, a wonderful mother, confident in her ability to raise her daughter despite being so young. She was a tomboy with a sharp sense of humor. She and Mike were planning their wedding. It was 3 weeks before baby Courtney's first Christmas. WHO does this. Who walks into someone's unlocked apartment in the middle of the day, does this, writes a message, and then disappears for 35 years? Mike Warner was initially suspected and quickly cleared. He was confirmed at work during the relevant time frame, and the fingerprint on the phone did not match his. All family members on both sides were fingerprinted and eliminated one by one. A former boyfriend of Kathy's was charged, and later cleared when the evidence did not hold up. Over the years that followed, thousands of people across 3 rivers were interviewed and fingerprinted. An extraordinary effort for a small community. Not a single match was found. An FBI behavioral profile suggested the person responsible likely lived in the area and may have known the victim. In 2012, the crime scene DNA was entered into CODIS. No result. Students from Western Michigan University's cold case program later digitized the massive 10,000-plus page case file. In the course of that work, one name appeared on just a single page of all those reports: Robert Waters. At the time, he was never investigated as a suspect. He was simply a name on a piece of paper, buried in a mountain of documents. The genealogy match. In May 2022, the Michigan State Police Forensic Lab sent the case to Aram Incorporated. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing and publicly available databases, including GEDmatch Pro, Aram identified the children of John and Judith Waters, 4 brothers from the 3 Rivers area. 1 was already in CODIS, eliminated. 2 voluntarily gave DNA cleared. Aram confirmed the contributor was 100% a sibling. The remaining brother was Robert Waters, living in Beaufort, South Carolina. On April 30, 2023, search warrants were executed at his home. His fingerprint positively matched the print on Kathy's phone. His DNA and footprint also confirmed matches. Robert Odell Waters, 53 at the time of arrest, had grown up in 3 Rivers. He was a childhood friend of Mike Warner. They had been classmates at 3 Rivers High School. About 1 month before the crime, Warner had invited Waters and his girlfriend to visit the apartment, giving Waters direct knowledge of the layout and the fact that the door was often left unlocked. After Kathy's death, Waters never surfaced as a suspect. He left Michigan. He relocated to Beaufort, South Carolina. He built an entirely new life. He ran a successful plumbing business. He was married with children. He lived in a $500,000 home in a quiet neighborhood. For 35 years, he was never fingerprinted, never had his DNA collected, never appeared in any criminal database. He lived as a respected member of his community, while the fingerprint he left on a dead woman's telephone sat in a case file in Michigan. Waiting. The ending. He was arrested on April 30, 2023, and charged with open murder. Just 5 days and 8 hours later, on May 6th, Robert Waters was found dead in his cell at the Beaufort County Detention Center. He had used a bedsheet. He was not on watch. On the table in his cell, investigators found Bible-based pamphlets about forgiveness. Chief Bowling confirmed that forensic evidence established Waters had acted alone and was responsible for what happened to Kathy Schwarz. For 35 years, Robert Waters lived as a respected businessman, a husband, a father, while the fingerprint he left on a pink telephone waited for him. Barbara Tucker, Gresham, Oregon, January 1980. A piece of chewing gum spit out on a bike path. That is what ended a 44-year search. On the evening of January 15, 1980, 19-year-old Barbara Mae Tucker was heading to an evening class at Mount Hood Community College in Gresham, Oregon. She had called her mother earlier that day, hoping class would let out early so she could visit a friend for ice cream. Near the campus parking lot, she was taken, assaulted, and beaten to the point of losing her life. Multiple witnesses driving past on Kane Drive that night saw a woman running out of a wooded area waving her arms frantically, blood on her face. One witness saw a man crouching in the bushes, watching. But not a single person stopped their car. Some later said they thought it was a college prank. The man emerged from the bushes. He pulled Barbara back into the woods. Her body was found the next morning, rolled into a patch of brush between Kane Road and the parking lot. Her purse and school books lying nearby. She never made it to class. Barbara Tucker was the youngest of 7 siblings, born into a large and close-knit family. At 5'11", she was a natural athlete who played basketball at Cleveland High School and was deeply involved in student organizations. She was studying business at the community college. Her family described her as a free spirit, strong-willed, independent, hard-working, dedicated, with a sharp mind. Her mother, Louise Tucker, never stopped fighting for answers. She maintained contact with police and the district attorney's office for the rest of her life, keeping handwritten records of every conversation, every lead. She wrote in her notes, "If it takes 10 years, I don't care. I just can't let it rest." Louise passed away in 1995, without seeing justice. Barbara's father, Albert Tucker, passed in 1989. He could never bring himself to talk about what happened to his daughter. In the end, it took 44 years. The science that found him, DNA technology, did not exist in 1980. Evidence collected during the autopsy was preserved. In 2000, samples were sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab. A profile was developed, but no match was found. Then Gresham police engaged Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia, where C.C. Moore, Parabon's chief genetic genealogist, led the genealogy work. A critical tool was Parabon's snapshot phenotype prediction, which predicted the suspect had red hair with extremely high confidence. The most confident red hair prediction Parabon's scientists had ever produced. Moore stated that prediction helped because it made her focus on one particular family line and follow that red hair down. And then she landed in Oregon. By March 2021, Moore had identified Robert Plimpton as the suspect. Gresham police placed him under surveillance, and they watched him spit out a piece of chewing gum while biking along the Sandy River. Detectives collected the gum. The Oregon State Police Crime Lab confirmed the DNA matched the 1980 evidence. WHO he was. Robert Arthur Plimpton was just 16 years old at the time of the crime, a student at Reynolds High School in Troutdale, Oregon, with no known connection to Barbara Tucker whatsoever. But his subsequent record revealed a pattern. In 1985, he was convicted of kidnapping after grabbing a woman named Patricia Spangler off the street in broad daylight and attempting to bind her with tape. He received 30 months. Over the following years, DUI convictions, misconduct charges, restraining orders filed by women in his life. In 1997, he was accused of another serious offense against a woman, charges ultimately dismissed. At the time of his arrest for Barbara's case, Plimpton was 58 years old, living in Troutdale as an out-of-work river guide, miles from where he had taken Barbara's life 4 decades earlier. A bench trial before Judge Amy Baggio ran from February 26 to March 15, 2024. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree. On October 3, 2024, Judge Kelly Skye sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 40 years. Double the mandatory minimum, reflecting the severity and cruelty of the act. Patricia Spangler, the woman Plimpton had kidnapped in 1985, testified at sentencing and told the court, "I could have easily been his next victim." Defense attorneys have stated they intend to appeal. A piece of chewing gum on a bike path, 44 years, and a man who never moved far from where he started. Type Barbara to keep her name in this room. Stop right here. 5 more cases to go, and the weight of what comes next is something else entirely. You are about to hear about a 15-year-old girl found face down in a Montana marsh, and the government biologist who held her there for 28 years without anyone suspecting a thing. A young woman who set out to hitchhike to an art show in Chicago. 50 years. A sealed adoption record. An 84-year-old man in an assisted living facility, and a stocking cap left in the snow. A gay man in 1990s Tampa, whose private life made the investigation nearly impossible, and whose case was solved on the exact 28th anniversary of the night it happened. 3 innocent men who spent nearly 18 years in prison for something they did not do. The real person responsible worked the overnight shift at Walmart a few towns over, and a 6-year-old girl grabbed from a parking lot in broad daylight while her sister watched. 1 strand of hair in an evidence locker, 30 years, and a full confession. These cases deserve to stay in the light, not to fade, not to become footnotes. Subscribe, so that when a new development comes in any of these cases, you hear about it here first. Like, tell the algorithm that families waiting decades for the truth deserve to be seen. Share, because someone watching this right now may have a connection to one of these cases they do not even realize matters. Type subscribed. We keep going. Danielle Houchins, Belgrade, Montana, September 1996. 4 rootless arm hairs. That is all investigators had. 4 rootless arm hairs preserved from a body in a Montana marsh. And for 28 years, that was not enough. On Saturday, September 21, 1996, 15-year-old Danielle Houchins left her home in Belgrade, Montana, a small city near Bozeman in Gallatin County, around 11 in the morning after a family argument. She told her mother she wanted to drive to the Cameron Bridge fishing access site on the Gallatin River to blow off some steam. She had injured her left knee while dancing at a street dance weeks earlier and was wearing a knee brace. She drove her own truck to the site. When she did not return by afternoon, her mother and a friend went looking. They found her truck in the parking lot, unlocked, water bottle and car keys sitting nearby. No sign of Danielle. The Gallatin County Sheriff's Office was called around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Search and rescue volunteers combed the area until darkness made it impossible to continue. 2 brothers who lived near the site kept searching after everyone else stopped. One of them found Danielle's body face down in a shallow pool of water in a marshy area. The state medical examiner listed the cause of death as drowning, with the manner of death listed as unknown, despite evidence of harm and bruising on her body. Her younger sister Stephanie, who was 12 at the time, later stated that Danielle had been forcibly held down in the marsh. The Gallatin County Sheriff's Office controversially declined to officially classify the case as a homicide. That decision created lasting frustration for the family and hampered the investigation for decades, making it harder to allocate resources and pursue leads with the urgency the case deserved. How long does a family have to wait for answers when the system will not even call what happened by its proper name? Stephanie's fight. Danielle's younger sister Stephanie became her tireless advocate. She started public campaigns. She refused to let the case disappear. She carried that fight for 28 years. In 2019, the Sheriff's Office renewed its efforts. In March 2023, private investigator Tom Elfmont, a retired LAPD captain, and Sergeant Court Depweg of the Newport Beach Police Department were brought in. The 4 rootless arm hairs were sent to Astrea Forensics in California for forensic genome sequencing, producing a partial DNA profile. No CODIS matches. The profile was sent to Parabon Nanolabs, where genealogist C.C. Moore connected the DNA to all 4 grandparents of a man named Paul Hutchinson. On July 23, 2024, Elfmont and Depweg approached Hutchinson outside the Bureau of Land Management office in Dillon, Montana, where he worked as a fisheries biologist. During a nearly 2-hour interview, Hutchinson displayed extreme nervousness, sweating profusely, chewing on his hand, slumping in his chair when shown Danielle's photograph. Approximately 10 hours later, Hutchinson was found dead from a self-inflicted wound. DNA collected from his body was sent to the Montana State Crime Lab, which confirmed a 100% match. WHO he was Paul Nathaniel Hutchinson, approximately 55 at the time of identification, had been about 27 when Danielle was killed. He was a longtime fisheries biologist for the Bureau of Land Management, 22 years of service. He held a degree from Montana State University. He was married for 22 years. He had 2 adult children. He was described as an avid outdoorsman. He had no criminal record, not even a traffic violation. There was no known connection whatsoever between him and Danielle Houchins. It was a crime of opportunity, committed by a man no one would have ever suspected. The case was announced as solved on August 8, 2024, by Gallatin County Sheriff Dan Springer. No charges could be filed. Law enforcement continues to examine Hutchinson's life for possible connections to other unsolved cases. Stephanie, Danielle's sister, finally had a name after 28 years of fighting. She just never got a courtroom. 4 arm heirs. A man who could not hold his composure for 2 hours, and a sister who refused to stop. Type Danielle to keep her name in this room. Mary Schlais, Dunn County, Wisconsin, February 1974. 50 years. Half a century between the night it happened and the morning investigators knocked on an 84-year-old man's door at his assisted living facility. And the thing that stopped them from finding him sooner was a sealed adoption record. On February 15, 1974, the day after Valentine's Day, 25-year-old Mary Kathleen Schlais left her apartment in the uptown area of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and set out to hitchhike to an art show in Chicago. A common practice in 1974. She was an honors graduate of the University of Minnesota. Her family described her as a brilliant, independent woman, a gifted artist, an equestrian, a world traveler, a scholar fluent in several languages. She had ambitious plans to teach and leave a lasting mark through her art. She never made it to Chicago. A witness in rural Dunn County, Wisconsin, approximately 8 miles west of Eau Claire, saw a man throw a body from a vehicle on a rural road at the intersection of 48th Avenue and 990th Street in the township of Springbrook. Mary's body was found in a snowy ditch. She had been stabbed more than a dozen times. Her purse and coat were never recovered, but a blue and orange stocking cap was found at the scene, a detail that seemed insignificant at the time and turned out to be the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. 50 years of dead ends. The witness described the suspect as a white male, about 6 feet tall, auburn hair, thick dark mustache, driving a gold-colored vehicle. An eyewitness, a physical description, a police sketch, a stocking cap in the snow, and still the case went nowhere for half a century. Detective Craig Kozer of Dunn County worked the case for over a decade, keeping Mary's photograph on his desk as a daily reminder. In 2009, her body was exhumed for additional DNA testing. By 2011, investigators considered the I-5 serial killer Randall Woodfield as a possible suspect. He was never charged. A partial DNA profile was developed from the stocking cap and entered into databases. No match. The real obstacle, the wall that stopped every investigator who hit it, was something no one had anticipated. The person responsible had been adopted. Standard genetic genealogy traces biological family lines. But when someone is adopted, those biological connections are hidden behind legal records and sealed files. There was no family tree to follow, no relatives in the databases to connect, no path through the traditional methods. The breakthrough. In 2022, the Dunn County Sheriff's Office partnered with the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College in Mahwah, New Jersey, led by Professor David Gurney, with Assistant Director Karen Binder. This became the center's first case to deliver an arrest. The partial male DNA from the stocking cap was uploaded to Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch. By fall 2023, a possible family line emerged. Investigators followed leads through Wyoming and Michigan, ruling out known male relatives one by one. Then, in fall 2024, another relative provided their genetic profile, and the final pieces fell into place. The suspect was John Keith Miller. On November 4, 2024, what would have been Mary Schlais's 76th birthday, Miller's DNA was confirmed as a match. WHO he was. John Keith Miller was 84 years old at the time of his arrest. He had been approximately 33 when he took Mary's life. His criminal history was extensive. 2 forgery convictions in the late 1950s, an attempted robbery conviction in Arizona, petty theft in California, and an armed robbery conviction that sent him to San Quentin Prison. He was released in May 1972. By 1973, city records placed a John Miller in Minneapolis. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Miller confessed. He admitted picking up Mary while she was hitchhiking. He made advances. When she refused, He grabbed a knife and stabbed her in the back more than a dozen times. He admitted the stocking cap was his. He also told investigators he thought he had gotten away with it because the car he was driving was blue, while the witness had described a gold-colored vehicle. The color of his car, that is what he thought had saved him. Miller was arrested on November 7, 2024, at his assisted living facility in Owatonna, Minnesota. He was extradited to Wisconsin and charged with first-degree homicide. He pleaded no contest and was sentenced on March 27, 2025 to life in prison, the mandatory sentence in Wisconsin, plus restitution and extradition costs. Mary's niece, Nina Mary Schlais, told the court, "While no verdict can undo the pain of losing Mary, we take comfort in knowing the man responsible has been held accountable." Miller is also being investigated in connection with a 1972 case involving a young woman in Minneapolis who was last seen hitchhiking. 50 years, a stocking cap in a snowy ditch, and an 84-year-old man who thought the color of his car had saved him. It almost did. Type Mary to keep her name in this room. Stephen Edenfield, Tampa, Florida, January to February 1997. A DNA profile from a tank top, linked through an FBI database to an unsolved case in a completely different state. Solved on the exact 28th anniversary of the night it happened. On the night of January 31st through February 1st, 1997, 41-year-old Stephen Wayne Edenfield, a longtime telephone company employee who had worked for GTE for approximately 18 years, had dinner with his brother and sister at his condominium at the Tampa Racket Club complex in Tampa, Florida. Before midnight, he left the complex and returned around 12:50 in the morning. At the gate, he told the security guard that the car behind him was also with him. The guard let both vehicles in, but did not get a clear look at the second driver. Within an hour, 3 neighbors heard sounds of a struggle and calls for help. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the security guard saw a dark shadow near the apartment. The next morning, when Stephen failed to appear to cook breakfast for his hospitalized mother, something he did every single day, his brother James went to check on him. The door was closed but unlocked. Inside, signs of a violent struggle. Broken pieces of a statue. A television and stereo blaring. Shattered furniture. Stephen's body was found in bed under a blanket. He had suffered stab wounds and blunt force trauma. On the bedroom wall, someone had written the word greed, using evidence from the scene. A custom-made solid gold identification bracelet engraved with Stephen's name, a piece his mother had made for each of her children, had been stolen. Stephen Edenfield was an openly gay man in the 1990s who kept his dating life extremely private, even from his own family. That privacy made the investigation extraordinarily difficult. He had mentioned dating someone called Carlos, but investigators were never able to identify that person. The man in the second car at the gate was never found. What happens to a case when the victim's private life is so carefully guarded that even the people who loved him most cannot help investigators piece together his final hours? The long silence. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office struggled for years to develop leads. Clothing found at the scene, socks and a tank top, contained both the victim's traces and an unknown DNA profile. But no match could be made through any available database. The case was featured on the Sheriff's Office Unfinished Business podcast in 2021 and again in 2024, with photographs of the stolen bracelet shared publicly in hopes someone might recognize it. In 2022, the Cold Case Unit sent evidence to Aram Incorporated for forensic-grade genome sequencing, funded by a Bureau of Justice assistance grant. By 2024, a previously unknown DNA profile had been developed from the tank top. The link across state lines. On January 10, 2025, the DNA profile was linked through an FBI database to a 2005 unsolved case in Waukegan, Illinois. The suspect in that case was a man named Brandon Gleyha. On January 22nd, detectives discreetly collected Gleyha's DNA in Tampa, where he was living. On January 31, 2025, exactly 28 years to the day after Stephen Edenfield's death, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement confirmed the DNA match. On February 5th, Gleyha was arrested on an unrelated Illinois forgery warrant. During booking, another sample matched evidence from the crime scene. Brandon Schleiha was 47 at the time of arrest and had been approximately 19 when Stephen was killed. When confronted, he claimed a person named Chino had picked him up in a car and that the two of them had met Edenfield before following him home. He admitted throwing a statue at the victim and striking him, but denied the stabbing. The sheriff's office stated they were not investigating any other individuals in connection with the case. Schleiha confessed. He was charged on February 24, 2025 with first-degree murder with a weapon and robbery with a deadly weapon. He is being held without bond at Falkenberg Road Jail in Tampa. The case is pending trial. 28 years to the day. A tank top, an FBI database. A link between Tampa and Waukegan that no one saw coming. Type Stephen to keep her name in this room. Teresa Fusco, Lynbrook, New York, November 1984. Before I tell you who did this, I need to tell you about 3 men who did not. Because this case is not only about a young woman who deserved justice. It is also about what happens when the pressure to solve a case leads investigators to destroy 3 innocent people, and the real person responsible spends 40 years quietly working the overnight shift at Walmart. On Saturday night, November 10, 1984, a young woman was last seen leaving the Hot Skates roller rink in Lynbrook, Nassau County, Long Island at approximately 9:45 in the evening. She was crying. She had just been let go from her part-time job at the snack bar. Her home was 4 blocks away. She was walking. On December 5th, her body was found in a wooded area near the rink, unclothed, buried under leaves, debris, and shipping pallets. She had been assaulted, beaten, and strangled with a ligature. DNA from an unknown contributor was collected during the examination. The case sent shockwaves through the tight-knit Lynbrook community, made worse by the fact that 2 other young women had gone missing nearby around the same time, creating what became known as the Lynbrook Triangle. The pressure on investigators was immense. The wrongful convictions. Under enormous public pressure, Nassau County Police interviewed approximately 400 people. In March 1985, John Kogut, 21 years old, was arrested after nearly 18 hours of interrogation that produced a coerced confession, a 7-page statement handwritten by a detective. The 6th version. 5 earlier attempts were never written down. Kogut implicated 2 other men, John Restivo, 26, and Dennis Halstead, 31. All 3 were convicted in 1986. Kogut received 31.5 years to life. Restivo and Halstead each received 33 years and 4 months to life. All 3 maintained their innocence from day one. Centurion Ministries took up their cases in 1994. The Innocence Project joined in 1997. Multiple rounds of DNA testing over the following decade excluded all 3 men. In June 2003, after approximately 17 to 18 years of wrongful imprisonment, all 3 convictions were vacated. Kogut was retried in a 2005 bench trial and found not guilty, with a landmark ruling that admitted expert testimony on false confessions for the first time in New York State. Charges against Restivo and Halstead were dismissed. In 2014, a federal jury awarded Restivo and Halstead $18 million each. 3 innocent men lost nearly 2 decades of their lives, and the unknown DNA profile still could not be matched. How do you go back to square one after 3 wrongful convictions, $18 million settlements, and 4 decades of pain? You go back to the DNA. The real answer. In August 2023, Nassau County investigators sent preserved evidence to Aram Incorporated for advanced sequencing. The FBI's investigative genetic genealogy unit used the resulting profile to identify possible relatives. The trail led to a man named Richard Billow. Investigators placed him under surveillance. In February 2024, they recovered a smoothie cup and straw he had discarded at a Suffolk County cafe. DNA from the straw was a 100% match with the 1984 crime scene evidence. Richard Billow was 63 at the time of arrest. He had been 23 when Teresa Fusco was killed. In 1984, he had lived with his grandparents in Lynbrook, approximately 1 mile from both the roller rink and Teresa's home. He told investigators he had operated a mobile coffee truck in the area. At the time of his arrest, he lived alone in Center Moriches, Suffolk County, working overnight shifts at a Walmart. He had no known prior criminal record, not a single arrest in 40 years. When questioned days before his arrest, he reportedly told investigators, "People got away with it back then." Nassau County District Attorney Donnelly responded publicly, "It's 2025, and I got you now." Bilow was arrested on October 14, 2024, and indicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty and was remanded to Nassau County Jail. His court-appointed attorney maintains his client's innocence, citing the history of 3 prior wrongful convictions in the same case. Bilow faces up to 25 years to life if convicted. Teresa Fusco's father, Thomas, attended the arraignment and pulled a small photograph from his suit jacket pocket. Her mother passed away in 2019 without ever seeing an arrest. As of March 2026, the case is pending trial. 3 innocent men spent nearly 2 decades in prison. The real person responsible spent 40 years quietly working overnight shifts a few towns over. Type Teresa to keep her name in this room. Morgan Jade Violi, Bowling Green, Kentucky, July 1996. 1 strand of hair, sitting in an evidence locker for 30 years. And a confession, in full detail, from a man who had no connection to a little girl, except that he pulled off the interstate and she happened to be playing in a parking lot. On July 24, 1996, in broad daylight during summer vacation, a young girl was playing outside with a friend in the parking lot of the Colony Apartments in Bowling Green, Kentucky. A man in a maroon Chevrolet van pulled in. He exited the vehicle. He first tried to grab the other child, who escaped. He then grabbed Morgan Jade Violi, threw her into the back of the van and sped away. Morgan's older sister Heather heard a scream and ran around to see the man in the van. An adult witness described the vehicle and a partial license plate. A composite sketch was produced. The FBI offered a $25,000 reward. U.S. Attorney Bumgarner said at the press conference announcing the case's resolution, "She was more than the worst thing that happened to her. She was a daughter. She was a little sister." The person responsible drove south on Interstate 65, exited at White House, Tennessee, pulled over near a barn, and ended Morgan's life using his hand and a handkerchief. He left her body in the woods. Nearly 3 months later, on October 20, 1996, skeletal remains were found by a woman walking near her home in Robertson County, Tennessee. The stolen van was found abandoned 2 days after the abduction at a truck stop in Williamson County, Tennessee. Fiber from Morgan's hair matched the van's seat cushion. The person who drove it could not be identified. 30 years. For 30 years, investigators worked this case. The FBI investigated extensively. Bowling Green police followed every lead. As recently as January 2026, they were still publicly soliciting tips. The case changed the way an entire city raised its children. Churches filled as safe gathering places. Parents stopped letting young ones play outside unsupervised. The breakthrough came from a single strand of hair recovered from vacuum sweepings of the stolen van in 1996, preserved in an evidence locker. For 3 decades. Due to recent advancements in forensic DNA testing at the FBI laboratory, a profile was extracted from that hair and run through the National CODIS database. Unlike every other case in this video, this one did not require genetic genealogy. CODIS returned a direct match. A man named Robert Scott Froberg, already in the system, because he was currently incarcerated in Alabama. WHO he was. Robert Scott Froberg's history was extensive and deeply alarming. In December 1988, he was convicted of armed robbery in Alabama and sentenced to 40 years. While in prison, officials found him with photographs of minors. In April 1996, he escaped from a work detail and fled across multiple states, robbing an elderly woman in Pennsylvania along the way. In May 1996, he was found hiding near a residential area in Dayton, Ohio, making contact with a young boy. He was apprehended and escaped again from a Pennsylvania facility in July, climbing a rain spout to the roof. On July 23, 1996, he stole the maroon van from Dayton, less than half a mile from where his parents lived. The next day, he took Morgan, On February 24, 2026, a Bowling Green detective and an FBI agent traveled to Montgomery, Alabama to interview Froberg. He waived his rights and confessed in full detail to the kidnapping and death of Morgan Jade Violi. He was 62. He had no connection to the victim. He was a stranger passing through Bowling Green on the interstate heading south. He pulled off the highway. A little girl happened to be playing in a parking lot. A federal criminal complaint was filed on February 26, 2026, charging Froberg with one count of kidnapping resulting in a fatality, a charge that carries potential penalties of life in federal prison or the ultimate federal penalty. As of March 2026, the case is in its earliest stages with arraignment pending. Morgan Jade Violi was buried at Bowling Green Garden Cemetery 30 years ago. A strand of hair from a stolen van finally spoke her name. Type Morgan to keep her name in this room. 9 cases, 9 families. A woman found beneath a pine tree in Racine, Wisconsin. Her killer's DNA in every database for 23 years. A woman found on a living room floor in Carlsbad, New Mexico. The man responsible dug up from a grave in Texas 36 years later. A 19-year-old mother in a Three Rivers apartment. A fingerprint on a pink telephone that waited 35 years for a match. And the man it belonged to, gone in a cell before he could be tried. A 19-year-old girl heading to community college in Gresham, Oregon. Witnesses who kept driving. A piece of chewing gum. 44 years. Life in prison. A 15-year-old at a fishing site in Belgrade, Montana. 4 arm hairs. 28 years. And a man who unraveled in 2 hours after 28 years of living free. A young woman hitchhiking to an art show in Minneapolis. A sealed adoption record. A stocking cap in the snow, 50 years, and a confession from an 84-year-old man who thought the color of his car had saved him. A man murdered in his Tampa condominium, a DNA link across state lines, solved on the exact anniversary of the night it happened. A young woman who left a roller rink in Lynbrook, 3 innocent men destroyed, the real person working overnight shifts for 40 years, a smoothie straw that ended it. A 6-year-old girl grabbed from a parking lot in Bowling Green. 1 strand of hair. 30 years. A full confession. These are not just cold cases. They are the permanent record of what science can do when it is given time, and what families carry when they do not have answers. For a year. For a decade. For 50 years. They are the reason this community exists. To keep saying these names. To keep asking these questions. To refuse the silence that cold cases depend on. Linda, Donna Sue, Kathy, Barbara, Danielle, Mary, Stephen, Teresa, Ricky, Morgan. Type every name you remember from this video, right now, in the comments. Type your country and city. Type Amen for every family who kept going when the system ran out of road. For the analysts, the genealogists, the investigators who never put the file away. For the truth, which, it turns out, was always there. Waiting. Subscribe. Because when one of these cases breaks, when a verdict comes in, when a new case is solved, when a family finally gets what they have been waiting for, you want to be in this room. Family, I love you. Every single one still watching, still asking, still refusing to let these names fade. 9 cases, 9 families, 0 excuses for silence. Keep going. Keep going. I'll see you in the next one. God bless. I'm Marcus Webb, and if you're new here, subscribe and join us. Like, share, and be part of the family.